Hello, I'm Foon, and I write the website hustlecastle.site, where I have a lot of basic explainers and reference material. This is my first attempt at a video, so be kind. This video is going to be about damage, and if it comes out well, it'll be part of a series of other explainer videos. So obviously it's a pretty basic topic, but this game has a lot of little hidden things, so even if you've been playing for a while, you might learn something, hopefully. And for me, it was sort of the gateway topic that got me excited about game mechanics and wanting to know more and more to the point where, I even started a website, which is, as I said, hustlecastle.site. So damage. Even the word damage can refer to a couple different things in the game. Here I am in the battle stats screen. As it says, this top bar here is damage dealt, the middle is damage received. This is the actual damage received, what passes through armor and wasn't dodged, etc. We can tell because the damage that the EOL deals is exactly equal to the damage that the incinerator receives. Notice there's this little extra physical damage that the EOL takes. That's coming from the ring rune. It's kind of interesting that self-damage counts as damage received, but not as damage dealt. So when someone says my EOL doesn't do any damage, this is what they're referring to, how much damage they actually deliver in battle. EOL is famously good at taking damage and staying alive and giving support, but their job isn't to be a big damage dealer. Incinerator, on the other hand, is meant to be a damage dealer. So for now, just notice these numbers that the incinerator is doing much more damage than the EOL is. So back to the barracks. All right, let's look closer at EOL. This is his damage per second. And, compare it over to the incinerator is much lower. EOL has more than half again this damage per second. So, how come incinerator does so much more damage in battle? And that's because these damage per second numbers are base weapon damage. And incinerator does all of its damage with special abilities. That's setting opponents on fire with the ancient set incinerator ability, as well as the abilities from the gear, in this case, throwing dinosaurs across the battlefield. A little side note before we dive into base weapon damage. I'm sure you've heard people say that magic damage gems are useless, or in general, gear that increases magic damage is useless. And maybe you thought, that can't be right, my mages do tons of damage. It's because in-game, the phrase increased damage or increased magic damage almost always means increasing base weapon damage, which is kind of useless on mages. If you start with a low DPS number, then add a soul that increases that small number by 1%, it's going to be a really small gain. The purpose of mages is their special abilities, whether that's support, like healing and res, or damage, like throwing dinosaurs. And to improve those special abilities, that will normally mean increasing spell power, not magic damage. Their base weapon damage is pretty inconsequential, so there isn't much to be gained by improving it. Okay, moving on. We've seen fighters dealing damage and taking damage. We've seen that damage from special abilities is generally more important than base weapon damage, particularly at the Throne Room 11 stage, and even more so particularly with mages. And that base weapon damage is the DPS number on the weapon, and DPS can be improved by gems or souls, but how does that work exactly? Let's dive in. Okay, this is damage per second, the base weapon damage for the fighter, the whole fighter. For this fighter, it's, let's see, 31,000, with 4,000 coming from the hero. And looking at the weapon, just the weapon part of where that damage is coming from, it's another almost 16,000 damage per second. And that is an average. If I tap that DPS number, I get more numbers, 28 to 34,000. Damage is always given as a range when it's related to weapon attacks, and just a number when it's coming from gems. It also says that this is a very slow attack speed. Very slow means one attack every 2 seconds, or if you prefer to think of it in that same per second terms, that's half an attack per second, or at least something very, very close to that. The 28 to 34 number is per attack, not per second. And if you average that range, you get 31,859. And if you divide that by 2, because it's only half an attack per second, you get exactly 15,929, which is listed as the damage per second. A little more about weapon speed. Weapons have 3 classes: tank, mage, and archer. And then there are types of weapons. For example, a tank has daggers, sword, spear, mace, and axe. And each of these types of weapons has an attack speed. All axes have very slow attack speed. If you want to know if you want to know more about weapon speed, or just look up which weapons have which speeds, I have that over on my website, the hustlecastle.site/weapons. So the weapon is giving 15.9 thousand. Where's the rest of that 31,000 coming from? There's some gems here on the weapon that's giving us some damage bonus. The weapon's soul gives quite a bit, and also more from the gems. Armor has no damage bonus, but the armor's soul, it does have a little bit of gives and even more from gems. Ring has built-in damage and gem bonus, and amulet has no damage bonus. And of course, as we already said, the hero is giving 4,150. So let me move to a spreadsheet to add that all up. Okay. So let's add up all the damage bonuses on this EOL. We want to calculate damage per attack rather than per second. We saw that 4,150 of the fighter's DPS is coming from the hero. We know an attack happens every 2 seconds, so to convert the hero's damage per second to damage per attack, we double it. Hope that makes sense. Some of the damage bonuses were ranges, so I'll just take the average of the upper and lower limits given, sum it all up, and we have damage per attack. Divide by 2, and we should have damage per second. Damage bonus is kind of cool how simple it is. 1 point damage bonus adds exactly 1 point of damage per attack. I really like how straightforward it is once you know how it works. Well, mostly straightforward. As you can see, there's a little, the numbers are a little bit off. I believe this is because weapon speed has a tiny bit of variance to it, seemingly just enough to make the numbers not be pretty and perfect. I've said that axe weapon speed is 0.5 attacks per second. How do I know that? The game gives us damage per second, and it gives us damage per attack for this weapon. And from that, you can get attacks per second. But again, it's a range. Using the average gets us close. Using the minimum gets us a little closer, but again, it's never quite perfect. If someone watching understands this part, about why it's not quite perfect better than I am explaining it, then please do reach out, and then I can update the weapons page on my site, and I'll add a comment explaining it here on the bottom of this video. Of course, fully crediting you. All right, that's the end of the math part. And if this was new for you, if this is new information, hopefully you enjoyed seeing how it worked. Back to the game. Okay. Now, in case you're thinking that it's all too straightforward and too easy, the good news, base weapon damage on mages is a little bit different. The overall concept is the same with different weapon speeds, except spell power also gives a bonus to base weapon damage. Game shows that here at the little green number. But otherwise it's the same, just magic damage instead of physical damage. And again, base weapon damage isn't worth giving too much thought about on a mage. Speaking of physical versus magical damage, the weapon determines if a fighter is a mage, warrior, or archer, and only mages can have magic damage as an attribute. That's, where all the bonuses get put into. Magic damage gem on a warrior or archer will make no improvement to their damage, and vice versa, physical on a mage. Here, my Bane has a ring with magic damage, but the fighter has no magic damage attribute. Same for spell power gems. They only do anything on a mage. It won't do anything for a tank or an archer. There is gear that will convert physical damage to magical damage, and also poison is dealt as magic damage, and not limited to mages, but both of those are special abilities, and again, don't care about magic damage or damage gems, because those are only improving base weapon damage. To me, what's interesting about how base weapon damage works is how much attack speed affects damage. If I have a gem that gives me 100 damage bonus, it'll add 100 damage to each swing of the axe, which happens once every 2 seconds. So that's just adding 50 damage per second. On the other hand, if I add that same 100 damage gem to a fighter with daggers, a fast weapon that does 2 attacks per second, I'm adding 200 DPS, 4 times as much for the same gold. If you're at the tier 11 stage, don't choose your sets based on the type of weapon and the weapon speed. But if you're at the stage of the game where you still have some fighters without top to bottom ancient gear, consider picking the faster weapon when all else is equal, because then the work and the gold you put into your gems will go that much farther. And there's other, effects and bonuses that might happen as well, per attack. For example, when I was first building my sets, I had a 4 out of 6 paladin with the daggers for a really long time. And I also really liked using the ghost artifact with daggers because the ghosts are just doing base weapon damage, no abilities. So, everything I put into increasing the damage on that fighter that wore the ghost arty was counting all the more. Same thing with an illusionist. Illusionist is my favorite set, and what it does is it makes a clone of the fighter with the highest DPS. So first, I have to pay attention to the rest of my fighter's DPS. For me, it kind of goes back and forth between my Lego and my Bane, who's number one, and then who's going to get cloned because they're number one. Then I want that fighter to have really high base weapon damage because the clone doesn't get the special abilities, it's only going to do the base weapon damage. The other takeaway from paying attention to how DPS works is the advantage of concentrating your damage gems rather than distributing them equally. Specifically, probably on your archer or assassin. Assassin is a tank wearing archer armor like a Lego. Here in my Lego, I have a weapon soul that increases damage by 60%. The weapon itself has an ability that sometimes deals an extra 60% damage. This rune increases damage by 300% sometimes. So every bit of gold I spend increasing damage, the damage bonus on my Lego here is counting even more. That's why I'm still putting gold into my Lego's mostly orange damage gems and leaving my EOL's purple damage gems just empty the way they are. Additionally, in the case of Bane and Lego, the two most popular ancient sets for an archer or assassin, they both have additional abilities that trigger when the fighter does a crit. A crit is a weapon attack that deals double weapon damage. So you should be maxing out crit on those fighters, and when you do, that's another way your investment in damage gems, or damage bonus souls, or whatever, any damage bonus gear is getting compounded again. Okay, I think that is everything I can possibly say about damage and then some. If you have any positive feedback, please send it my way and maybe I'll make more videos. All right, I'll see you around.